Thank you, and great to see everyone here. Let me start with an experience that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So it's Monday morning, I come to the office, I turn on the computer, and I start checking my emails. And I don't know how you set up your mailboxes, but I have two. One for work and one for what I call miscellaneous, everything else in life. So I'm checking my miscellaneous mailbox, and I'm going through things like marketers' emails and LinkedIn messages and doctor's appointment reminders. And then here comes an email, and it's from my old university where I went to college. Can anyone guess what that email is about? Yes, it's asking me for a donation. So when I get this email, what do? I go over it very quickly, and then I press delete. And it's not because I don't like my old university. It's just that that email wasn't really speaking to me. And in that moment, it's really easy to just let it go and move on. And that's very common. However, there's also another kind of email that I get from my old university. In these types of emails, instead of asking for money, they're inviting me to one of the many alumni events. So it could be a book club or a hiking trip or to join a volunteering group that go to clean up the beach, all sorts of things that I can participate in. When I get these emails, I usually read them with a lot of interest and actually think about them. And often, even though I'm too busy to participate in these events, those emails still leave an impression in my brain. They make me feel warm and fuzzy and happy just thinking about all these wonderful things I could be doing with my fellow alumni. So why do these emails about spending time have such power? My research with my colleagues show that this is because time and money speak to our brain in very different ways. Whereas money makes us think, time makes us feel. So to test this idea, my colleague and I ran an experiment with a nonprofit organization. And in this experiment, our goal was to raise money for the organization from MBA students. So we first introduced the students to the organization, but we had two versions of this introduction. In one version, we told them about the organization, and then we had them in this learning process focus on whether they're interested in donating money to the organization. In a second condition, the other half of the students, they learned the same things about the organization, but we directed their attention to thinking about whether they would volunteer for the organization. After this introduction, we solicited donations from all of the students. And we found that the group that first thought about volunteering for the organization donated more money than the group that thought about donating money to the organization up front. So that is the power of thinking about time and the emotional engagement that comes with thinking about time. So let's look at the science a little bit more closely. Time and money are both cognitive knowledge structures in our brain. We gain our knowledge about them through a lifetime of learning, starting in childhood. However, we learn about these two things very differently. We learn about money through things like numbers and logic and calculations. So when we think about money, our immediate association are analytical, and it puts us in a very analytical mindset. On the other hand, we learn about time through an embodied process. Time cannot be separated from our body. We cannot go through time without our body also experiencing the time. We experience time either in pleasant ways or in unpleasant ways. We spend time either feeling happy or feeling negative. So time is inherently accompanied by bodily feelings and emotions. And therefore, when people are asked to think about time, their whole body gets activated. Their emotions get activated, and they become emotionally engaged, and they make more emotional decisions. And that's what we mean by time makes us feel. So at this point, you might be having a revelation. You might be thinking, wow, wonderful. Let's just make people think about spending time with me and my brand. It'll be nothing but love. Well, our research shows that it's a little more nuanced than that. So remember that people can be having a great time, but they could also be having a lousy time. And so instead of time making us always warm and emotional, what time really does is it sensitizes us to our emotions. And we actually become more discerning of what makes us happy versus what makes us unhappy when we think about spending time. So here's an experiment that shows this idea. In this study, we invited people to come to the lab to perform tasks for money. This is one of the tasks. In this task, people are asked to count the number of zeros on this page. Now, if you're trying to do this in your head, then you'll realize it's an extremely painful task, especially if you do this page after page. Then you realize it's torture. So this is one of the tasks, and we asked people, how interested are you to do this for money? In another condition, we had a different task where people were asked to identify the emotions that's shown in a picture. And I can assure you that this is a much more fun task than counting zeros. So these are the two tasks that people were asked to do and asked to indicate how much they would do. In one of the experimental conditions, we asked people to focus on how much time they would be spending on doing either one or the other task. And we found that consistently with the task, people are very discerning of whether the task made them happy or unhappy. They were much more willing to do the fun task than the painful task, even when they both paid the same amount of money. That makes sense. However, look at what happens when we asked people to focus on how much money they would be making on these tasks. The difference between the fun task and the painful task greatly flattened. It's as if people focused on making money, then as long as they're making the same amount of money, they don't even care if they're doing a painful task or a fun task. So the takeaway should be that we should be inviting people to spend more time with us, but we should make sure that it's a good time. So the holy grail in business is that elusive emotional engagement with customers. What our research shows is that one effective way to create that emotional engagement with your customers is by inviting them and creating opportunities for them to spend more time with your brand in a positive and meaningful way. And this strategy is a win-win for both customers and the brand. For customers, they gain better, more positive, happier experiences. And for the brand, they gain a deeper relationship with their customers and greater loyalty. So let's all think more about creating a good time. Thank you.